On this episode of Locked On Angels, we know who's on the roster for 2025, but who has a chance to maybe crack that opening day roster that's not currently on it now? We're going to share the non-roster invitees for spring training and tell you who might just be playing with the big club on opening day. It's time to get locked on with Mike and John, and this is Locked On Angels.
You are Locked On Angels, your daily Los Angeles Angels podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Here for you 5 days a week. Thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. You can find us anywhere you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and SiriusXM by searching Locked On Angels. And if you'd like to give back to the Super Halo Bros for all the Super Halo content, here's some things that you can do. Leave us a rate and a review on Apple Podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button. And if you're not subscribed already, please subscribe. We're looking to get to 10K by opening day. Right now, we're at 8,500. So we need your help to get there. Let's get to 9K by next week. How about that? Doesn't rhyme like it does, but anyway, let's move on. Whether you're watching or listening, come over to YouTube, leave a comment. It's one of the best ways to get in touch with John and I and be a part of the conversation. And this episode of Locked On Angels is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Download the app or head to their website, FanDuel.com, to get started.
Happy Monday to you, and thanks for being here for this episode of Locked On Angels, where it's your team every day. You've got the Frisch Brothers here with you, a.k.a. the Super Halo Bros. My name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
Hey, we're ramping up for our fourth season here as the host of Locked On Angels, talking Angels baseball Monday through Friday, every single weekday here with you. On today's show, we know who's on the 26-man roster so far, but who was invited to spring training and could possibly crack that opening day roster. A lot of intriguing names, a lot of storylines to watch this spring, and we're getting ready for spring training games, Mike. They're coming up fast and furious. So let's get started with who the non-roster invitees are in spring training.
Yeah, John, let's start with the left-handed pitchers. There's two non-roster invitees, Victor Gonzalez and Sammy Natera. There are 10 right-handed pitchers, including Connor Brogdon, Chris Cortez, Michael Darrell Hicks, a guy we've talked about a lot, Angel Felipe, Jose Fermin, Austin Gordon, Dakota Hudson, Ryan Johnson, George Clausen, and Camden Minacci.
I like that list.
I like that list. A good list. 4 catchers, Juan Flores, Dario Lavarde, Alberto Rios, and Sebastian Rivero. And then 8 infielders, Tim Anderson, J.D. Davis, Cole Fontenelle, Denzar Guzman, Carter Kieboom, David Mershon, Christian Moore, and Yolmer Sanchez. And then, of course, 2 outfielders, a name that you probably know, Nelson Rada, and another name that you, I'm sure, know, and that's Bryce Teodosio.
Yeah, so there's a few recognizable names on there. Obviously, Tim Anderson being one of those. Christian Moore is somebody that everybody's looking to see how he's going to play in spring training. And then, of course, J.D. Davis. A lot of interesting storylines for the infield, Mike, and you and I will talk about some of the names that we think might crack the opening day roster, or at least have a chance to come spring training. But let's start with Tim Anderson, who recently sat down with Rhett Bollinger and talked with him. He was asked about his opportunity to prove himself with the Halos this spring, and Tim had to say, it's a setup for a great story. It's just overcoming a lot of things. It's not like I haven't overcome a lot of things in my career. This is just another challenge that could be positive, that could be a great hurdle, that could be a turning point in my career. I'm excited about it. And then Rhett asked him why he thinks things took a downturn for him. He said, I started creating bad habits with my swing. I had an injury to the leg. So once I came back, I lost the feel. I lost the touch. I lost a lot. Everything felt different. So it caused me to start doing the wrong things and start creating that bad habit. I got caught up in this bad habit, and that became a norm. That's what caused the frustration. So once I got released, I got into the lab, and I've been training to break that bad habit. When asked about getting a minor league deal and an invite to spring, Anderson said, I understand what I'm up against. I understand what's going on, but I'm just thankful for the opportunity. And my goal is to go out and make them excited about it as well.
John, a lot of development for Tim Anderson, which is great. And I think being around somebody like Ron Washington is a benefit to him. Whether he ends up being who he was or not is another conversation. But I think just for the human, for the ball player, to be around somebody like Wash, to be able to work on some things, get back into the lab, be able to figure out why he's been doing the things that he's been doing. He's obviously recognizing it and starting to work through it. But I think there's not a better manager right now at this time than Ron Washington for Tim Anderson.
Yeah, when you and I had seen that Tim Anderson got a minor league deal, we discussed that on the show, and I went and looked, and I thought, where did things begin to go wrong? And it's essentially that, Mike. It's the leg injury. I think there was a foot injury in there somewhere, or a knee, or something like that. But I remember looking at the injury history and just saying on here on the show, oh, he had no legs, and so that's where it all goes wrong, especially if you're trying to compensate for that and building yourself a bad habit, like Tim Anderson said. So I appreciate the effort that at least he's communicated to Rhett Bollinger of MLB.com, saying, I got in the lab, I realized what's going on, I got a bad habit, I'm trying to fix it. I think that it bodes well for Tim Anderson, at least being a somewhat productive player at some point.
And he can do it at spring training because they now have, guess what, a practice facility, a lab out there, so they can figure out some of this stuff.
Imagine that.
They're getting ahead of the game out there. I love that. John, you mentioned Christian Moore. Ron Washington spoke about what he's seen so far from Christian Moore as they've just started spring training. He's already there. He said he's proven to me that he has a lot of aptitude. He's proven that you can give him things and he's going to apply the things that you give to him. I love that. He also said he's just a young kid who's hungry and has a lot of wealth of knowledge. Now, remember, when he was drafted, what fired me up, and I know fired you up, is Christian Moore said that he's a winner, he's a competitor, and he's vowing to get a ring for sure, and he believes that it's in his blood. John, I love that the Angels are going to get a good look at Christian Moore this spring. He's going to face some major league pitching, obviously not always going to be a major league starter or reliever on the mound, but he's going to get some good reps. I would love to see him, depending on his health, I would love to see him play in more games than he doesn't. And I would love to see him start at second base. I would love to see him at least the first maybe 10, 20 games. He's in about 15 of those, just so that you can get a good picture of who this guy is, because I think that there's some potential for him being there on opening day. And again, we'll talk about that in a later segment, but I really like the attitude he brings. I like the energy he brings. And I think that this is the type of player that this team has lacked for so long. I think Zach Neto's in that category. After interacting with Logan O'Hoppe at the O'Hoppe Bowl. I think he's in that category. I think the more guys that you have that are going to run through a wall for you is what this team has desperately lacked the last 10 years, really. And I think that this is the season where you probably take a chance on a Christian Moore, don't you?
Yeah, I imagine he's going to be up with the club at some point this season, if it's not opening day, and it'd be great to see that. I'd love to see him get a look in the major league roster. But Mike, one thing I noticed over the weekend, there was a great video of Yoan Moncada doing the Washington drills.
Yeah.
And, he was learning how to do that. And it's so funny because it seems so simple.
Yeah.
Because it's just, you catch it here and you catch it here and you catch it there. But you hear Ron Washington explaining the drill, and you start to understand what he's trying to ingrain in these guys. And it's a fluid motion kind of thing when you're picking the ball at a corner outfield or infield spot. And what I noticed was Rengifo standing there watching Moncada do the drill, and then Christian Moore walks by, and there's just a great buddy moment between Christian Moore and Luis Rengifo, like instantly. And so I was like, that's one, it's cool to see that he's gelled already. I'm sure Rengifo is friends with everybody because that seems like the kind of guy that Rengifo is. But I think like, hey, that small moment just shows me that there's some good chemistry with Christian Moore there. And so it would be really fun to see how that develops over spring and maybe even into the 2025 season.
The impact that Ron Washington is going to have on this team for years to come is, I think, going to be significant, just because he's not just helping these players be better, but I think he's establishing some great scaffolding, right? Some great groundwork for whoever might be the next manager in the next 5 years. And I think that what he's doing now needs to be copy and pasted, because he's not just having a thumb drive impact, right? Like, he's getting his fingerprints all over this team. And I love that he's working with the younger guys, because those guys are guaranteed to be around for a while, obviously, unless they get traded, but they're more than likely going to be around for a while. and to really make an impact on this team, not just this season, but in seasons that are coming, that you're working on those simple things. You're working on the very basic things, right? Like there's a great story about the Green Bay Packers original coach and Vince Lombardi. And when they lost the Super Bowl, the next season, he started the first conversation by saying to his guys, this is a football. And our goal is to get this across the line so that we can score 6 points. And we need to score more points than the other. That's where he started, John. And I feel like that's what Wash has been doing with this team last year. And again, he's going to do it again this year. And I think what has really happened is a lot of things. But one of the things is that just lost the basic, simple practice of what it means to be ball players. And it's across the board. I think that the front office can learn from Wash, like do the simple things well. I think the scouts can learn from Wash, do the simple things well. And that's when you're going to win. So I love that he's working with the young players. And I love that even the veterans are coming in and they're buying into what he is promoting.
Yeah, let's talk about JD Davis, Mike. He's 31 years old, had a tough season across the A's and the Yankees last year, a 218 batting average, 293 on base, 338 slugging with only 4 homers and 6 RBIs across 46 games. Now, he is a career 257 hitter, 340 on base, 425 slugging percentage in 8 seasons across the Astros, the Mets, the Giants, then, of course, the A's and the Yankees from last year. Best year offensively came with the Mets in 2019, had a 307 batting average, 22 homers, 57 RBIs in 140 games. He also hit 18 home runs in 144 games for the Giants in 2023. Brings some infield depth, plays third, first base, and a little bit of outfield as well. So, Mike, if you had to venture a guess here of these 3, who has the best chance of making the opening day roster between JD Davis, Tim Anderson, and Christian Moore?
I want to say Christian Moore just because he's my favorite, but I do think that the one who has the best chance is Tim Anderson because they're not going to have a third baseman with Rendon out. They have Moncada over there. They're going to have Zach Neto out for a bit. I could see them wanting to supplement the infield with somebody like a Tim Anderson. Now, there was a report that he was also taking some fly balls in the outfield. And so that's good news, right? They want to move him around a bit. But bottom line is he's a major league caliber player that would be a perfect backup for a Zach Neto being out. I know he doesn't play short, but he could be a perfect backup to help supplement that infield. And then I think like tier 2 would be a JD Davis because of his flexibility around the infield and he can play outfield. I think what they want to do with Christian Moore is give him a spot and let him run with that spot for a time. And then if he starts to crush it when he's in, I guess, AA or AAA, depending on where they put him, then I can see him being called up in about maybe late May, early June. But my guess would be that the first name on the roster that they would consider because of the infield depth that they need is Tim Anderson. What do you think?
My big question here is who's backing up Nolan Shawnuel at first base? That feels like a unanswered question to me, unless you can have somebody like Kevin Newman do that. But what do you think? Do
you think that this is an opportunity for Travis d'Arnaud to be at first and maybe even Logan O'Hoppe learn that? But I would say probably d'Arnaud first.
Yeah, d'Arnaud's done it before. Yeah.
They get both of those bats in the lineup. I mean, that would make sense initially from my perspective.
Yeah, there's a lot of unanswered questions. Like we're going to be talking about Mike Trout tomorrow and where he's going to play. But yeah, I was just thinking about who's going to be the backup guy for Nolan Shawnuel over there. So to me, it makes sense for JD Davis. But at the same time, I mean, gosh, it feels like they need middle infield as well. So between second base and shortstop, I could easily see Tim Anderson cracking this roster as well. And, he's historically been a shortstop. And then he did play some second base, with the Marlins. But with Tim Anderson, I think that the idea there would be he could move to second base. Perhaps Kevin Newman is a little bit better of a defender. You could even put Rengifo there if you needed to. So it seems like there's a lot of versatility to go around. It's just a matter of who's going to crack this roster. And we'll get into, who has the best chance or who we're watching to see what happens later on in the show. But thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. Coming up on the show, we have some names that you recognized already. But what about some names you might recognize and haven't seen a lot of and might want to pay attention to We're going to get into that conversation in just a minute.
All right, Johnny, big brother speaking to little brother here. You need SelectQuote. You're newly married, few years into this. You're a new dad, and for those of you that are out there that are dads, that are moms, that maybe have a family to take care of, you need SelectQuote on your team. They're going to help protect your legacy and your family's financial future. SelectQuote is one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, helping over 2 million customers find over $700 billion in coverage since 1985. Other insurance brokers offer impersonal, one-size-fits-all policies that may cost you more and cover you less, and you don't want that. But with SelectQuote, they're licensed insurance agents. They work for you to tailor a life insurance policy for your individual needs in as little as 15 minutes. And I can vouch for that because it did take 15 minutes. And if you're in good health, which, John, you're in good health. Look at that. Look at that dad bod you got there. They work with carriers that could get you same day coverage for up to $5 million with no medical examination required. And these policies are more affordable than you might think. You can get coverage for up to $1 million for as little as $20 per month. All of it sounds too good to be true. Guess what? It's not. SelectQuote is on your side. Visit their website, SelectQuote.com/locked-on, and a licensed insurance agent is going to call you right away with the right policy for your life and for your budget. Again, SelectQuote.com/locked-on to get started. SelectQuote, they shop and you save.
This is the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. And every dayers, thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. We're continuing our conversation about the non-roster invitees. So they're not on the 40-man, and of course they're not on the 26-man. So if anybody is going to make it here, they're going to need to move some pieces around, Mike. And we're kind of talking about who might have a chance to crack the opening day roster. Mike, why don't you start us with the first of the perhaps lesser known players that you might want to know, Sammy Natera Jr.
Yeah, and you might be thinking to yourself, well, who could they get off of the 26-man roster or the 40-man roster to make room? And I think the name that everybody thinks about is Jose Suarez, right? That's an easy move, right? So Sammy Natera Jr. is a left-handed pitcher with a lot of potential, Johnny. MLB.com did a write-up about him. They said that he's pitched 3 seasons at New Mexico State and then 1 summer in the Cape Cod League before the Angels drafted him in the 17th round of the 2022 draft. He reached Double-A Rocket City in his first pro season. Then he returned to High-A Tri-City in 2024, made just 5 appearances with 2 starts. It was limited by injuries, but he's somebody that is interesting because he works with a pair of what they call boring fastballs. Not boring like they're putting me to sleep, but like boring like it's driving, it's drilling. He has a sweeping slider, according to scouts, and a cutter and an occasional changeup. So 4 different pitches that he can really be effective with. His delivery is a bit funky, a bit violent. He's adding an element of deception to his pitching delivery when he's throwing the ball, which makes his pitches even more effective. John, he's 25, will be 25 this season, but he's only thrown 105 2/3 innings in the regular season, meaning that his developmental road might be a bit longer than his age would suggest. I know 25, you kind of maybe want to hit the major league roster at that point, but he might need some more time due to his injuries. But John, scouts are saying that his stuff is good enough to reach the big leagues one day, and he can become a very consistent starter for whatever team he's on. And right now he's on the Halos, and somebody that I think we should be paying attention to.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch him in spring training and see what he has to offer. I'm interested in watching that funky delivery. I got to go look up some highlights now of Natera Jr. All right, Mike, next up, Yolmer Sanchez, who won a Gold Glove in 2019, but has only played 28 games in the majors since 2019 with a 64 OPS plus over that span. He's an infielder. I don't know, man. I know that this is a lesser known name, but this has Andrew Velasquez written all over it. And I'm not sure I want to go down that road again, but somebody that is more intriguing to watch would be Cole Fontenelle over at third base. Man, he had a vicious injury last season, broke his fibula in 2 spots and tore his deltoid ligament while he was sliding into second base. And it was awful timing because he had a great first month with the Trash Pandas. He was hitting 278, had 2 home runs and 9 RBIs to go along with 12 stolen bases. He was leading the team at that point. And then when he was asked about returning to the field for the first time, Fontenelle said, I know the day is going to be special. I know how hard I've been working. So when I do return, it's going to be really great. So that's going to be fun to watch. I am looking forward to watching Cole Fontenelle. Just a horrible injury that derailed him last season.
Yeah.
But man, imagine if he had that last year of experience, we might be having a very different conversation about third base this year.
Right.
But if he continues to grow and develop, we could be talking about him come 2026.
I've heard a lot of talk about him, John. In fact, a lot of people are excited about him. And in fact, remember last year we were talking about like the depth and why this person was on the team and why this person had to be at third base or shortstop. And you and I were talking about, well, the depth is not great in the minor leagues. And so I made a comment about like, who are you going to go to? Cole Fontenelle. It was just the name that I pulled off the page. And then one of our everydayers got really mad at me because they really like Cole Fontenelle. So then I got facetious and sarcastic and talked about him multiple times, called him a Hall of Famer, all of those things because it's fun. It's baseball, but his name has risen to the top, John. He's been somebody that scouts have been paying attention to. And a lot of Angel people have been talking about him. And if he didn't get injured last year, there was a narrative that maybe perhaps he would be somebody that could back up at third base or maybe even be competitive for third base. So he's someone that we should pay attention to. Another one that we should pay attention to, John, George Clausen, one of the guys that we got in that Carlos Estevez trade last year, first season in the minors. Clausen had some success. He was 6-5, a 3.10 ERA, 22 starts, 93 innings pitched, and 135 Ks with a 1.18 WHIP. When he was traded, the Halos moved him through the system very quickly. Surprise, surprise, surprise. He had just 1 start at Single-A Inland Empire after having 9 starts in Single-A with the Phillies organization. Then they moved him to High-A. He had 5 starts there, 1 and 2 with a 4.22 ERA, 21 in the third innings pitched, 32 Ks and a 1.17 WHIP. Pay attention to the innings and the Ks as we talk about that. Then with Rocket City, which is Double-A, 7 starts, 28 and 2/3 innings pitched, 36 Ks and a 1.6 WHIP. So they're moving these guys up, specifically George Clausen, moving him up. Really, they want to see like what he does with the challenge of who he's facing. And when they get to Rocket City and that league is more like professional ball, even though it's minor league players. Mm-hmm. And so that's why you see this almost rushing of him, because in High-A with Inland Empire, he had 1 game, Single-A. Then in High-A, 5 starts. You wouldn't say that those numbers are super successful, but it is the innings to strikeouts. You see that he's really, as a starter, he's striking out a lot of batters. So there really wasn't much of a challenge. The ERA and the 1 and 2 winning percentage, like that's just a sign that he still has some control that he's working on and where he's throwing pitches and things like that. But John, with Rocket City, he still had a great differentiation between the innings pitched and the Ks. The thing that I would be concerned about and why I don't think that we'll see him anytime soon is the 1.6 WHIP, because that's a lot of walks and hits, almost 2 per inning, right?
Yeah, it's the control issues with George Clausen. He's got to be able to have a little bit better command, and I think that's the biggest thing that they're going to be watching for him this season, especially during spring training and then wherever he ends up, probably back with the Trash Pandas, of course. But, he's very exciting to watch. He's very highly touted, and again, probably the best pitching prospect that they have. And so it just takes some refinement. It takes some control over that command and trying to get him sharper. And I think that's something that they'll be working on. So in terms of any of these guys making the roster for opening day, Mike, I don't think there's anybody here that I would say is a shoo-in.
I agree.
Between, Fontenelle, Clausen, Yolmer Sanchez, and Terra Jr. Now, I will say, I know that I kind of glossed over Sanchez, but in terms of maybe some defensive depth, right? If you need somebody off the bench to come in and play those late innings. And look, that's what Andrew Velasquez was good at, right? He was able to come in and get those great defensive plays. It was just the Angels always ended up at a spot at a certain point of the year where he was starting every day at shortstop or second base or something like that. And so that was just really frustrating. So I don't imagine anybody of these guys are going to make the roster to start the year. But Mike, if things go south in the end of the season and they want to give a look to somebody like George Clausen, I could see that being the case, especially for him, because he's a very intriguing pitching prospect, and they're going to want to see how he handles some major league talent.
Today's episode of Locked On Angels is brought to you by FanDuel. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout any NBA game, so that even if you miss the opening tip-off or if you want to bet on the fourth quarter, you still have that opportunity. You can stay in on all of the action, and if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love that word, and I'm learning more about betting. My brother-in-law is a bettor, and so he was teaching me about parlays. So pretty soon, I'm going to be driving a Lincoln. And so you can use FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment exciting for you and for your attention span as you're watching the NBA. And when you're watching your game, watching your team, there's a late rally, or maybe there's a player that you're excited about, you can bet on them as you're watching because you think they're going to hit the clutch three or they might make the final bucket. That's what I love about FanDuel. So easy to use. And when you win, you get paid instantly. And right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit their website, FanDuel.com, to join today. Again, FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
All right, Mike, our final conversation has to do with who are we watching come spring training? Who are the names that are on the non-roster invitee list that are intriguing to us that we would perhaps like to see on the opening day roster, or even maybe just get a good look at the guys during spring training so we know what to expect from them later on in the year. Plus, there's a lot of storylines kind of weaving in and out of this team, especially with the middle infield as well. So I want to ask you, who are you watching? What storylines are you watching? Who do you expect to maybe make the opening day roster? What do you say?
Yeah, let me talk about the non-roster, and then I want to mention a couple of people on the roster that I'm going to be paying attention to. First, the non-roster guys. I just want to see Nelson Rada play. He's just an exciting player. I want to see what he does against major league caliber players. He's 19 years old, still has a few years of development. We're probably not going to see him until maybe 27, 28, right? And that's a couple years from now. I also am excited to see Christian Moore because we've heard a lot about him, but we just haven't really seen too much of him. And so the fact that these games are going to be broadcasted, and why I would want him to play maybe 15 out of 20 games to start, is because I want to see him. I want to see him play. And I don't want to see him on the split squad, the second team that's playing that's not on TV. I want to see him on the TV
in the backyard somewhere at someone's house. Yeah.
I want to see him. I want to see him on the big field against the big club with the big players. I want to see what he can do against those. And then we mentioned George Clausen, John, but there's a lot of great scouts that talk about his swing and miss stuff and that he is the next great Angel ace. And I think that if he can figure out his location, he could be somebody that we could get really excited about. Now, when it comes to the roster, I want to pay attention to two guys, Joe Adell and Nolan Shonowell. They figured out some swing stuff last year. Did it stick? That's the question, right? I want to see what happens in spring. I know spring isn't going to be the greatest announcement on if they're going to be good or not, but I think that that'll be an indication on where their head and their mind space is at. And then I want to see what Yusei Kikuchi can do. Did he remember what he did with the Stros? And in spring training, I want to see if he's working on some of that stuff. So I'm going to be looking for him to throw more of his off-speed stuff and more of his slider. I want to see him utilize that like he did last year. Sounds like, John, that he's understood the assignment and understands what it is the Astros taught him and reminded him of, and that he's working on that right now in spring training.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with Kikuchi is, can he maintain the command that he was able to get with the Astros? Because that's been an issue over the course of his career, but it all depends on how confident you are in throwing what you're throwing up there. And the one thing that you're going to have to watch out for is if that slider is his biggest weapon, an ideal slider is going to start in the zone and then dip out of the zone. And if guys are able to stay off that, is he going to induce a lot of walks, things like that? So that's going to be interesting. to watch from him. Mike, I'm actually interested in obviously the infield storyline here between Tim Anderson, JD Davis, and Christian Moore. I want to see how that plays out. And look, we've said it on the show before. If Christian Moore gives them, if he makes it difficult in terms of, man, we really got to have Christian Moore on this opening day roster, I say good, because I know that rushing prospects up is, kind of the Angels thing. But the fact is like, if you get a guy that you cannot refuse, I want Christian Moore to be that guy.
Yeah.
And if perhaps at some point during the season you need to send him back down, okay, not the worst thing in the world.
Right.
But man, I mean, we've talked about it before with Zach Neto being out to start the season. Obviously, he's going to be around the team. Man, you want somebody with that Neto level enthusiasm. We always talk about the difference between ball players and athletes. Zach Neto is a ball player, gritty, dive in the dirt ball player. I see the same thing in Christian Moore, and I'm excited to watch him play in spring training. So I'm really intrigued by that storyline. As far as some of the other names here, I'm actually interested in getting looks at somebody like Chris Cortez, who they drafted last year. Michael Darrell Hicks is a relief arm that we've been talking about a lot. His name comes up a lot. And then Ryan Johnson as well, who we all know was the compensatory pick for Shohei Ohtani, leaving for the Dodgers. So that's going to be intriguing to watch as well. But Mike, I think for me, it's the idea that the Angels have some flexibility in the bullpen in terms of options. And I mean that as in, optioning guys back and forth between the major league club and the minor league clubs, something they didn't have the luxury of in years past. And it's why you got stuck with a Jaime Barria or a Jose Suarez all season long, because they were out of options and you didn't have anybody to come up and replace them. So there's a lot of fresh names and fresh arms in terms of the number of options they have. So I'm interested to see who's beyond the current bullpen depth in the minor leagues that we will probably see at some point come up and get a look in the major league club. And again, whether they make the team or not isn't really the question here. It's more of, hey, if we lose a Ryan Zefferjon or Hans Kraus goes down, who is coming up to replace them? If somebody in the bullpen needs a day and needs to be replaced with a fresh arm, who's getting optioned down and who's coming up? So I'll be interested to watch guys like Michael Darrell Hicks and Chris Cortez and Ryan Johnson to see what they bring out of the bullpen. I want to see what their stuff looks like, especially against major league hitting. That's another thing that you and I will be paying attention to, is the level of competition that some of these guys are facing, whether that be hitting or pitching in spring training.
Hey, thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB with our friend Sully. You can find his show on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Hey, be sure you give us a follow on social media at Locked On Angels on Twitter, at Super Halo Bros on Twitter and Instagram. Whether you're watching or listening, come on over to today's show on YouTube. Get in the comments section. We'd love to hear from you. Hit that like button and that subscribe button while you're there as well. Mike, what do we have on deck for Tuesday's show?
Well, there was a report on Sunday that Mike Trout met with all of the managers and upper management about where he's going to play. Then the report said on Monday he was going to talk about it. So we're assuming he's talking about it today. Maybe he already did, depending on when you're watching this show. We're going to tease that out, work it all out, figure it out tomorrow. Mike Trout speaks. We listen tomorrow on Locked On Angels.
All right. Looking forward to that conversation, and we hope you'll come back and join us. Until then, my name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
Thanks for being here with us, everybody, and we'll see you back here on Tuesday.
Mike Trout, left field.
He better.